Good morning to everyone. I'm Ritesh Kumar. Here I am presenting our assignment 2, that is a project on implementation of deep CNN with reduced parameters. And in this topic, we discuss about how we reduce the parameters such that the CNN model is implemented in a lightweight manner. First question is that why lightweight CNN model is needed. So as we see that in CNN there is a high computational complexity, which has a large number of parameters, and according to this there is a huge number of operations needed. So CNN model is a heavy model which the processing is quite complex, and time required is more. So for this implementation of CNN model on a embedded system or for a hardware development, so we require a large power uh, for the embedded system. So also uh, it has large design cost and limited flexibility. So these problems are associated. So we can need a lightweight CNN model. So the best possible solutions that we have to reduce the computational complexity, but this can be achieved when the learnable parameters are also reduced and the number of operations are also reduced. So number of operations may not be reduced for every neural network, because some networks have large complexity and many complex problems such as video conferencing and video detection, yeah, or audio detection or classification problem. In those type of models we need a complex possibility. So best possible way to make a lightweight model is to reduce the parameters such that the overall system is light. So parameter reduction is the best possible solution, which results in low memory requirement. That is, the number of parameters reduced, the size of the model is also reduced. So that can be easily implemented on hardware, which it also requires a low power consumption, and it is suitable in cost. Convolution neural network, as we know, the convolution neural network is normally a convolution process in which input data, that is in a form of image, that is CNN is basically used for image classification problem. That is the main purpose of the CNN. And in this problem, such as CNN, how works, let us see. The input data is of dimension df by df, that is the size of an image, with m number of filters, m number of channels, sorry, filters, m number of channels, in which a convolution process is done through a filter with n number of sizes, and this filter is also called a kernel. The size of the filter is dk cross dk, and it has m number of channels. So after convolution, we got output of dp cross dp, that is the size of the output, and with n channels. So in normal convolution operation, the output size is dp cross n, as from the figure. The number of multiplication in the first convolution operation, that is the size of the filter, that is dk cross m. Since there are n filters and each filter slide vertically, as this uh, this filters is slided on this vertical side. So for each dimension we have horizontally dp times, because output is dp, so dp times it is horizontally placed on the input data. So total number of multiplication, that is n cross dp multiplied by multiplication per convolution, that is the previous one, that is dk cross m. So for normal convolution operation is this one, n cross dp multiplied by dk cross m, that is n cross dp square plus dk square multiplied by m. This now we discuss about the depthwise separable convolution. Convolution as we see that it is used to learn the features as well as classify the data. So in image processing, image classification, we have several type of work, that is from images, how we learn the features that about the image, image contrast, image brightness, what type of figure it is. This is the type of learning features, and what after classifying, for classification purpose, it is such that that is as we know a data set of dogs and cats, and we have to separate them, which image belongs to cat and which image belongs to dog. This type of work is done by CNN. So there are many types of CNN. One of the class of CNN are depth-wise separable convolution neural network. So in this depth-wise separable convolution neural network, we have some reasons. So the two reasons are mainly because of this is used. That is, they are less they have lesser number of parameters to adjust as compared to standard CNN. As we know, standard CNN, in previous slide we discussed that that is the multiplication of uh, number of channels in the kernel, number of channels in the uh, input data, and multiplied by the square of the size of the filters. So this depth-wise separable convolutional networks reduces the overfitting overall, because in normal CNN there is a possibility of overfitting such that uh, the the kernel size may be larger than the normal input data. So these type of complexities are reduced. They are computationally cheaper because of fewer computation, which makes them suitable for mobile vision application. Okay. Though this point is also refers to the uses of CNN. Some of the important applications of this type, that is depth-wise separable convolutions, are mobile net and exception. Both are proposed by the Google. And as we see, this depth-wise convolution network is divided into two parts, that is depth-wise convolution and point-wise convolution. So these are two sequences which we have to operate in this type of convolutions. So first of all, depth-wise convolution. In depth-wise operation, convolution is applied to a single channel. That is a single channel, that is DK. Here m number of channels. So for one channel, operation is needed. That is one filter of DK cross with one channel is convoluted on DF cross DF cross M. So after m number of filters, they are convoluted to this input. So in depth-wise convolution, it is applied to a single channel, that is for m channels, one by one channel is applied here. So it is a time unlike that, which is unlike that the CNL which we have done for all m channels. So here the filter and kernel will be size dk cross 1, as we discuss here, the filter size. Given that the m channels in the input data, m are such filters are required. So for m number of channels, there must needed a m number of filters here. So finally the output becomes dp cross m. So this overall cost of the operation has a single convolution operation requires dk cross dk multiplication, this one. And since that filter is slided by dp cross dp time, because the output is dp cross dp, so it is slided by dp cross dp times with m channels, that is m filters. The total number of multiplication is m cross dp cross dp cross dk, that is m into dp square multiplied by dk square, that is the final. So depth-wise convolution operation has this much type of multiplications. Next is point-wise convolution. In point-wise operation, one cross one convolution problem is applied on m channel. That is the size of the filter, that is 1 cross 1, and it is of m channels. So this is applied directly on the input. So filter size is 1 cross m, that is discussed here, such that we see there are n such filters. So this one filter is repeated n times, That is, total number of output size becomes dp cross dp cross n. So now this cost, the cost of this operation is the single convolution operation for this filter to this input is 1 cross m times. That is 1 cross m. This is convoluted on this. So the total number of multiplications here is m cross m is the number of channels multiplied by dp, so that we get the output dp cross dp multiplied by number of filters. So there are n number of filters. So dp cross n. Okay. Then total number of multiplications is m cross dp square cross n. Now total overall operations we need total multiplication, that is in depth-wise convolution multiplication plus point-wise convolution multiplication. So total number of multiplications is, as we get in depth-wise, m cross dk square cross dp square, that plus in point-wise m cross dp square cross n. So after summing this, we get m cross dp square cross dk square plus n in bracket here, and furthermore reduce, and this is the total number of multiplication as we get here finally. Now comparing the normal CNN or a standard CNN with a depth-wise separable CNN, we have in a standard CNN the complexity here is n cross dp square cross dg square cross m. Here dp is the output, dg is the input. Now the depth-wise separable convolutions have m cross dp square cross dk square plus n. Here after taking the ratio, we get the total ratio in the complexity, that is total complexity of depth-wise separable convolution divided by complexity of standard convolution. So we comparing it from the standard convolution, how much time it is greater or smaller. So ratio becomes here 1 by n plus 1 by dk square. This is the simplification of this ratio. Let's take an example. Let me consider that we have number of channels equal to 100, and the filter size is 512, that's 512. So we get the ratio of r equal to 0.010004. This means that the depth-wise separable convolution network in this example performs 100 times lesser multiplication as compared to the normal convolution. So depth-wise also reduce the parameters and complexity. So this implies that we can deploy faster convolution network model without losing much of the accuracy. So this is overall about the neural network and the deploy. Thank you very much.
Good evening everyone, my name is Arka Roy and today I am presenting the topic called parameter reduction approaches for the deep CNNs. Here basically our aim is to reduce the size of the parameter in deep neural networks, whereas keeping the accuracy unchanged, or we need to increase the accuracy for a given problem. So basically for the implementation part, we are actually focusing on the database called ICPHI 2017. It's a challenge database which contains 920 respiratory sound audio recordings from 128 patients with a wide range of sampling frequencies. So basically 4 universities have collaborated for creating the database, and because of that the recording devices had different kind of sampling frequencies ranging from 4 kilohertz to 44.1 kilohertz. So and there is also some class imbalances there also in the database, and the recording length is also uneven, so it ranges from 10 seconds to 90 seconds. So the database contains the respiratory sound signals, and which corresponds to 3 different disease types. Like few people are of normal, like they don't have any kind of respiratory issues. Few people have chronic diseases like COPD, asthma and bronchitis, and some persons have non-chronic diseases like UTRI, LRTI, and bronchiolitis and pneumonia. So our problem statement is basically, given some lung sound signals, we need to make some low complexity and basically lightweight deep learning model which can differentiate whether the lung sound is belonging to normal class or chronic class or non-chronic class. So the existing papers, which are basically published in between 2020 to 2021, they are listed over here. So on the first paper is basically published on IEEE JBHI, and they propose the methodology like this. They have some kind of pre-processing blocks. Then they have converted the pre-processed lung sound signal into spectrogram, which is a time frequency representation. And then after that, they have applied it the spectrogram as an image and feed it into some CNN. And these are basically the metrics, specificity, sensitivity, and the ICPJ database itself gave us introduced a new set of performance metrics that is known as ICBHI score, which is basically mean of specificity and sensitivity. So the first paper, they have got highest ICBHI score of 0.91, whereas on the second paper, which has been published in Transaction in Biomedical Circuits and System, they got ICBHI score of 66% only. Whereas in 2021, on the third paper, we can see, which is also published in JBHI only, they have done some pre-processing, then empirical mode decomposition, which is basically a non-stationary signal processing technique, which decomposes the signal into some constituent modes, and then they have got different modes and selected some specific mode, which is based on the correlation criteria. Then they converted that mode into continuous wavelet transform based time frequency representation, which is called as scaleogram. And then they also treated the scaleogram in the same way, like image format, and feed it into the CNN. So the last paper, the second and third paper, actually they proposed like their CNN is actually a lightweight CNN. So the lightweight CNN, what why it is required, that we already have seen, like my previous member has already told why lightweight CNN is significant. So the third paper actually got an ICBHI score of 0.97, which is till date the highest ICBHI score on the database. So let's just first discuss about the SOTA lightweight networks which are being proposed by the previous papers. So this paper actually they have given the block diagram in such a way, like given the respiratory sound, they have some kind of pre-processing technique which includes noise filtering, breathing cycle segmentation, and some duration based filtering also. Then what they have done, they took the empirical mode decomposition as a non-stationary signal processing tool, converted the signal and converted the signal into some specific modes, selected this mode based on correlation criteria, then converted into the scaleogram, and they named it as a hybrid scaleogram because they have first used empirical mode decomposition to get the proper IMF. Then what they have done, they use some data augmentation technique, because already I have told, like the database contains some data disparity and due to that they have used data augmentation technique. Then they have proposed the CNN. So in CNN they told like their CNN is actually a lightweight CNN. So here I have shown the CNN block diagram. So what it contains actually, some 2D CNN blocks followed by batch normalization and max pooling 2D, and this block is basically repeated 4 times with different numbers of filters. Then after that they flattened the output of the last convolution layer, and then some dense layers are there, and at the end the softmax layer is applied for doing classification. So we actually simulated the same on a Python platform. So on Python, actually, we have already coded the CNN what they have proposed, and this is actually the number of trainable parameters. We can see that huge number it yields actually. So but lightweight networks, they should contain less amount of parameters, because if the networks has lesser amount of parameters which comprises of lesser amount of weights, it will basically help for edge computing devices where we don't have that much amount of memory, because in edge devices we already know that there is some scarcity of memory. At the same time, the second paper, they also treated the breathing. They also first took the breathing sound signals. Then on the time domain signal, they actually have applied data augmentation technique such as pitch shifting, time stretch, and amplitude scaling. These kind of data augmentation technique actually they have applied. Then what they have done, they converted the data, they converted the time domain data into time frequency representation. But here they have used a Mel spectrogram. What is Mel spectrogram? Mel spectrogram is basically a some sophisticated version of normal vanilla spectrogram. It converts the normal spectrogram into some Mel beams and gives the time frequency representation in a compact form. So given this Mel spectrogram representation, they have also told like their network is a lightweight network which comprises of different convolution blocks, max pooling blocks, and at the end we have some kind of a dropout and fully connected layers. So we also here also we have simulated the same network in Python. So we can actually see the trainable parameters are huge actually. So our proposed methodology is basically given the lung sound signal. We also have some kind of pre-processing techniques. The pre-processing techniques basically includes a DFT based baseline wandering removal. Baseline wander is basically comes due to the respiration. While recording the data, if the person is respirating, so thereafter some sinusoidal baseline is basically induced in the data. So in lung sound signals also, while recording the data with the stethoscope itself, some baseline wander is basically induced within the data. Thereafter that we have some noise filtering techniques by using normal butterworth bandpass filter, and after that pre-processing technique, we have a block of short time Fourier transform, which is basically a time frequency representation. And given these short time Fourier transforms, we basically have treated it as three channel image. Basically short time Fourier transform gives a single channel image kind of format. We replicated that same output data into three channels, so we can get some feel about RGB images by projecting the single channel image into magma color map. Then after that, what we have done, we treated these short time Fourier transform as images and feed it into a lightweight deep learning model, which can classify whether the signal, whether the lung sound signal belongs to normal class, chronic class, or non-chronic class. So the proposed lightweight network is basically contains some convolutional blocks, which is a normal convolution actually. Thereafter we have the depthwise pointwise concept. So in depthwise pointwise concept, we actually know the depthwise convolution and pointwise convolution. They both actually helps to reduce the number of parameters, as well as they helps to reduce the number of computation in the CNN. So here after the normal convolution block, we have depthwise pointwise convolution block, which is basically uh, given over here. And then after that we actually have designed a novel parameter reduction block, which is named as mobile inception. It basically contains some inception block, and within the inception block we have actually implemented the basic idea of mobile net. In mobile net, we know that depthwise and pointwise convolution is basically efficiently used to reduce the number of parameters. That's what we have done in mobile inception. It has some inception kind of structure, but within the inception we have the concept of mobile net. After this mobile inception block, we have global average pooling, and then after we have some dropout, and at the end we have softmax layer with three neurons to classify whether it is belonging to normal class, chronic class, or non-chronic class. So before going into the deep learning model, let us first briefly talk about what depth-wise and normal standard convolution parameter-wise differ. So in normal convolution, here there is an example. For example, we have a kernel which has a size of dk cross dk, and we have m number of filters. So dk cross dk. So for one kernel, we have dk square because the channel height and width is dk and dk. So we have for one kernel, we have the parameter of dk square cross m. So if we have n such kernels, it will be n cross m cross dk square. Whereas in depthwise pointwise convolution, the convolution property is basically split into two parts. One is the depthwise and one is the pointwise. On the depthwise convolution, we have a kernel of dk cross 1. So the parameter for single kernel would be dk cross 1. So if we have m number of kernels, it will be m cross dk square. and in the pointwise convolution we have 1 cross 1 convolution actually, with a with a channel size of m. So for one kernel we have number of parameters are 1 cross 1 cross m, whereas if we have n number of kernels then n cross m will be the total number of parameters. So in both depthwise and pointwise, if we add both these parameters, we will get mdk square plus m into n number of parameters. So if we add them, and we will get m within bracket dk square plus n number of parameters. So if we basically compare that how much number of parameters we have reduced, we can check it like this: number of parameters in depthwise separable convolution divided by number of parameters in standard convolution, which yield like 1 by n plus 1 by dk square. So we can see that the depthwise convolution is actually reducing the number of parameters, whereas in normal convolution there is a exponential hike in number of parameters, whereas in the depthwise convolution, depthwise pointwise convolution, we have exponentially decaying the number of parameters. So we already told like how our lightweight neural network is constituted of. So it contains normal convolution block, then depthwise pointwise convolution, then the main thing is this mobile inception block, which is replicated twice, and then we have global average pooling, dropout, and dense of 3, which consists of a softmax activation. So the mobile inception block is basically consist of these kind of inception structure, which all we already have seen in Google Net. But here we actually have changed the convolution pattern. Like here we have added depthwise convolution and pointwise convolution to give a hike in parameter reduction. Whereas in normal inception there was no concept of depthwise convolution, whereas in our approach we have added the depthwise convolution in two of the branches of the inception block. So this 1 plus 1 convolution is basically the finest convolution which extracts the low level features. Then we have we have a kernel of 3 cross 3 depthwise convolution. So in 3 cross 3 the receptive field is of 9 parameters. So if the receptive field is of 9 parameters, we can say this can extract the mid level features, whereas on the third block we can see the kernel is 5 cross 5. So the receptive field is high, so it can may extract the high level features. And in the last block we can see first we have a pooling structure. So what pooling structure does is basically it extracts the local statistics from the convolutional block. So after extracting the local statistics from the convolutional output, it basically gives some kind of reduced information, and from those reduced information, if we apply 1 cross 1 fine convolution, it basically can extract some more significant features too. After extracting all these features, we can concat all these features one after another to get some good representative feature, which may classify the lung sound signals pretty well. So in terms of performance analysis, first is basically how much parameters we have reduced. That's the main thing. So we can see that our mobile inception block, after employing the mobile inception block and the whole lightweight neural network, we have total number of parameters is less than 5,000, whereas in the previous papers we already have seen that number of parameters is exceeding 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs. So here we have drastically reduced the number of parameters using mobile inception block and depthwise pointwise convolution. And in terms of accuracy curve, we can see that the green line is basically the validation, and blue line is the training. So while validating at the time of training the neural network, we are also actually employing fivefold cross validation. So at the time of fivefold cross validation, we have got the highest accuracy around 96%. And this is basically the confusion matrix at the time of testing. At the time of testing, we can see the confusion matrix is basically performing very well. So only one chronic patient is basically misclassified as non-chronic. Among healthy also only one is basically misclassified, and in non-chronic case we can see that there is actually two patients have been misclassified. So these ICBHI people, what they have done, they actually introduced the database, as well as they have introduced two new, actually not new. They are basically sensitivity and specificity. We all know what these are, but they had basically told like how to calculate the sensitivity and specificity in a new way. So they have given the equations like this. If this is the confusion matrix from the respiratory disease detection problem, which consists of chronic, non-chronic, and healthy classes, and these are the parameters. So sensitivity will be calculated like this, whereas specificity will be calculated like this, like total amount of healthy people, which is classified correctly, divided by total amount of healthy people present in the test set. So we can see the first paper, Shubo et al., which is published in 2021, they have got an ICVHI score of 0.97, whereas the Farm et al., they have got a ICVHI score of 0.91, whereas in Shubo et al., actually in paper it was not there ki how much sensitivity and specificity they have got. They just showed like how much ICVHI score they have got only. So Palmetto, they have showed their sensitivity is 0.86, specificity is 0.95, and Acharya et al. They have got ICBHI score pretty low, like 66% only. Whereas in our case, we can see the sensitivity and specificity is scaled up, like it is exceeding all the it is outperforming actually all the papers till date published. And ICBHI score, we have got ICBHI score almost similar to Shubo et al. Actually on the third decimal place it's actually differing. Otherwise what we can say that previous papers where they have told like, for example, here we can see uh, here we can see that the SOTA lightweight network contains huge amount of trainable parameters, and they are actually producing ICBHI score of 0.97. Whereas in our case, we have reduced the parameter to a great extent. We have reduced it in like it is below 5000 trainable parameters. So using only 4835 parameters, we are actually getting almost the same results like Shubo et al. So these results are comparable. So in the sense that lightweight network, we already have outperformed all the published paper till now. So this is basically the presentation side, and here actually we have implemented in Google Colab platform. So this actually contains some important libraries which we have imported. Then we loaded the database, and we used the unzip actually to unzip the folder. Then we have loaded all the meta files which is present in the database itself, and then we calculated what is the demography of levels, how many levels corresponds to healthy, pneumonia, bronchitis, etc., etc. Then we have concatenated all the signals which actually belongs to the chronic class, because chronic class itself contains COPD, asthma, all these diseases. So we have clubbed all these signals together to create a chronic set. Similar to that, non-chronic set is also basically coupled with bronchiolitis, pneumonia, etc. So this is actually that we have done the chronic list, non-chronic list, and healthy list just by clubbing all those signals together and forming a list. Then what we have done, we also already told like this is the chronic section. We can see that in chronic there is lots of samples, whereas in healthy and non-chronic there is very less amount of samples. So class imbalance is there. That is what we can see in all the biomedical problems. So to alleviate these um, class imbalance problem, we also have introduced some data augmentation techniques also. Like here we are stretching the sound. We also have added white noise, pink noise. After that, what we have done, we shifted the pitch. So these effects we have introduced to augment the signal. So this is basically the augmenting portion. Like we are actually augmenting the chronic section, the non-chronic section, healthy section. After that, what we have done in signal processing, we all know that we cannot feed the whole signal into deep learning networks. We need to pre-process the signal in such a way that we should get some fixed duration of timing signal, and then after that we can convert the signal into some representation like time frequency representation in short time Fourier transform scaleogram itself. So for that, what we have done, we took a fixed window and we have a sliding window. So the fixed window is basically of 5 seconds. So the signal sampling rate, we converted all the signal into 4 kilohertz. Actually, basically we are downsampling all the signals because the database contains the signal worth 4 kilohertz to 44.1 kilohertz. We converted all the signals into 4 kilohertz sampling rate. So the fixed window have 20,000 samples. That means 5 seconds we are considering, and we have implemented a 50% overlap. So given the fixed window, we are overlapping the samples by 50%, and then we are taking next window. So in this way, we segmented all the signals, normal class, then chronic and non-chronic. Then what we are doing actually, we are creating the list which contains the one hot vectors. Like these are basically the representing chronic, and these signals are basically representing non-chronic. In between, we have some representation for the healthy classes also. Here actually what we have shown, we converted the signal into time frequency representation, and this is basically the spectrogram or short time Fourier transform, and we converted the short time Fourier transform into a 224 cross 224 cross 3 image to give it into the deep learning network itself. Then what we have done, we partition the training, the whole database into training, testing and validation. Then this is basically the CNN model. What we have told, like this is a mobile inception block which contains the low level feature extractor, mid level feature extractor, high level and most significant, and then we are concatenating all the features that we have extracted using all these depth-wise, point-wise, normal 1D convolution, normal 2D, 1 cross 1 convolution, and max pool with followed by 1 cross 1 convolution. And this is basically the number of parameters. It is showing that how much parameters are there in our CNN model. So we can see that it's actually 4835 number of parameters only. And here we can see this is the training curve, like how much accuracy is there. In validation, we already have told that we are actually reaching 96% accuracy. So here we are showing the confusion matrix. In the confusion matrix, we already have shown in the PPT through how we are actually classifying all these signals pretty well, which comprises of ICVHI score of 0.97, which is comparable to Shubo et al. So to a great extent, we reduce the parameter drastically, and we are actually getting almost the same results published by Shubo et al. In JVHI. So here actually I end the presentation. Thank you everyone.